Let's talk a little bit more about this with Andrew Levy, labour market analyst. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. You have no doubt been watching the developments. Perhaps let's just start with what's happening around Sibanye Stillwater. The miners are saying they've been on strike since February, and they've accused Sibanye of being greedy and refusing to pay their demand of a 1,000 Rand pay increase. Now, obviously, during times of high inflation and a dwindling GDP and obviously other external shocks, government says it finds it very difficult to negotiate such a rate. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I think one's got to be very careful when one listens to comment on strikes from both sides. Pardon me, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Because there's a lot of disinformation. The first thing is that the amount that the Sibanye workers are claiming, and even more, the SARS workers are claiming, is more than double. In fact, it's nearly 3 times the average level of settlement at the moment. They will not get settled at that amount. It's just beyond the numbers. It's beyond the supply and demand. It's beyond the labour market conditions. Now, these extreme openings that the unions go for, I can't quite understand whether they believe this is a good negotiating tactic or whether it's one that has worked in the past. But I think that what it leads to is these breakdowns when the parties are far too far apart and there is little chance of settlement. And so we get lengthy strikes. And the longer the strike goes on, the more likely it is that the union is going to have to shift its position and do so quite significantly. And the mere fact that they are camping at the union buildings and demanding to see the president and demanding the president to intervene is indicative of the fact that they're becoming desperate. Now, I'm very sympathetic to the circumstances, but, one should really say that government involvement in collective bargaining, in free collective bargaining, has got to be an absolutely last resort. And it's got to be something which threatens the broadest public, for example, hospitals, nurses, which we may yet see, or something which is going to have a devastating effect on the economy. This is serious, but I don't know that it's there yet. Equally, this argument that other mines can afford it and that this mine is greedy, with respect, I don't know that they are aware of the financial position, the profitability, the grade of ore, the efficiency, all of those things which determine how much a company can pay. I certainly don't know these things. And all of the arguments are such that in reality they're seeking to apply pressure, moral pressure, with this argument about the differential in wages, which is not correct strictly.
All right, let me just jump in there, Mr. Levy. You have said that we need to be careful about the arguments from both sides. Then what are the employers being liberal with, just in terms of the viewpoint that they're presenting? Workers are saying that you can't pay someone, a CEO, they're referring here to Neil Furneman, saying 300 million Rand makes the situation worse when workers are receiving a pittance.
Yes, I'm afraid this is misinformation. In this respect, with great respect to Sibanye, they've lost the PR battle. The fact of the matter is that Des Furneman did not earn 300 million Rand. I think his salary is in the region of 12 million, plus significant bonuses. The additional money that he earned as dividends on his shareholdings. Now, that is not remuneration. And I think it's significant to note that in many of the mines, the workers have been offered share participation schemes and they've turned it down, usually on the advice of their unions. Now, I know of a platinum miner which this year had a payout to staff who did accept share options, and the least amount paid out was 70,000 Rand. So I think we really need to be careful as to what we're talking about. Yes, they may say Froneman's a capitalist and he owns shares and that's why he gets dividends. But this is not to say that's what he paid. That's simply not true. Now, this is not to deny that there is a wage gap in South Africa. But in reality, the biggest wage gap is between the people who are earning a salary and the 50-60% of our citizens who are unemployed and earn nothing. Now, if you take, for example, the fact that the national minimum wage is just over 4,000 Rand, and the miners will earn on average around about 14,000, they're approximately 3.5 times better off than nearly 50% of all South Africans in work and 100% of all South Africans who are unemployed. So I think one needs to be a little bit careful about these arguments. But to bring it back to the numbers, the economics of the circumstance determine where the settlements will be. And if one is aware of those numbers, then in point of fact, you can plot very accurately where settlement levels will be. Now, the gold mining sector is a high settlement area, and if they have a split settlement, in other words, they give more to the lower paid, which they should, because across the board increases only make the wage gap bigger, okay? If they favor the lower paid, the lower paid may well get 8 to 9%, the others may get 7.5%, which is already at the moment approximately 2 to 3% above the average level of settlement. Will they get 9%? And then the additional demands? No, they won't. And I don't believe that the state president will in fact be able to compel the company to do so. And frankly, it would be wrong if he did. What he might be able to do is to act as a go-between, as a peacemaker, and try and make a deal with both sides. Because the one thing that is absolutely true, and you learn, in any career in labor relations of any length, is that all strikes end one day, and that all strikes will usually end with each party making some concessions. Now, if you look at negotiations, the convention is completely I move, you move. It's called the must move convention. Now, Sibanye, and I don't work for them, I don't hold a candle for them, I'm a neutral observer, but what I observe is that Sibanye has moved from 800 to 850. Now, on that basis, it's up to the union now to make a move if they want peace. If they say we're not prepared to, then the strike must continue. And what they're trying to do is to use other sources of pressure to compel the company, because it doesn't look as
Let's
if
look
they're
at those
going
sources of pressure. The unions are saying that it seems like Sibanye is threatening Section 189 in order to resolve the matter. Your thoughts of that? And we've also seen Nahau saying that it supports not only the strike at SARS, but this strike as well. And James Wellstead, the spokesperson for Sibanye Stillwater, has balked at this, saying that he's not even sure about the legal standing of this matter.
Well, I can't comment on the legal standing of the matter. If he's talking about President Ramaphosa's intervention, I suppose it depends how he intervenes, but the Constitution does provide for free collective bargaining. However, that's a rarefied debate, and this is not one for the moment. If one goes back to the threat, and we're not talking about SARS, we're talking about Sibanye, which I'm quite happy to do. The Labour Relations Act says that the purpose of the strike is to apply pressure to make the employer move. It is not to destroy the enterprise itself. And that should the strike move from the application of pressure to a situation where it threatens the very existence of the enterprise, then the employer is entitled to turn to Section 189 and retrench. Now, to the best of my knowledge, this has never been done in South Africa. I may be wrong there, but if I am, it's a minimal sort of situations. And it probably is the case that at this point, this is Sibanye also applying its own pressure. I mean, we get this from both sides. But the one thing that is terribly sad, and I think it was Professor Vittori of Pretoria University, who did a study. I may be wrong there, but I think I'm correct. And the study found that the typical management response to a strike in South Africa when the strike is over is to retrench, not to seek to become more efficient and recoup the costs of additional wages. Now, that, of course, is a national disaster. And I, for one, would not be surprised to find that retrenchment follows the end of this strike. I wouldn't be surprised at all. And that's just, it's really a tragedy. And I think that were the unions to be a little bit more realistic and make that move, then we might find a settlement.
Okay, we're going to, I'm afraid, have to end it there. We have run out of time, but thank you very much, Andrew Levy. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Labour market analyst Andrew Levy. And of course, the union bosses are also calling on the Minerals and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe to revoke the license rights of Sibanye Gold Mine. So we are keeping an eye on the developments there. You're watching The Globe on this Africa Day. Do